As foreign troops hand over security of Helmand's capital to Afghan forces, questions are being asked about their readiness to secure the country. Afghanistan in transition, the next phase. This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Hazem Seeker. On Wednesday, NATO troops in the Afghan city of Lashkar handed over control to local Afghan forces. This comes right after handing over both the province of Bamiyan and the eastern town of Mehtalam. Many see the handover of Lashkar as a critical step in a transition of power before foreign troops end their combat operations in 2014. Lashkar is the capital of Helmand province in southwestern Afghanistan and is considered the most contentious of 7 areas on the list for handover this week in the first phase of a transition process. But in a number of regions there are concerns over whether Afghan forces will be able to provide adequate security. Sorabi district, which sits along the strategically important highway between Afghanistan and Pakistan, is one such place. Bernard Smith has more.
These French gendarmes on patrol with the Afghan police may be well armed and well protected, but they're patrolling on foot rather than in armoured vehicles. In Sorabi, that's seen as progress. But this is the only district in Kabul province not yet considered safe enough to be handed over completely to Afghan forces.
The police need serious training. We lack weapons suitable for this terrain and we lack personnel. There's only 150 police to cover 1,100 square kilometers of this strategic district. Then there are tribal militias who fight amongst themselves. They should be enrolled into the police.
Despite the governor's grim assessment, the French expect this area will transition to full Afghan security control before the end of the year. The gendarmes have taught the local police what they call le French touch, talking to people to build trust. The Afghan police have a nationwide reputation for corruption, so building trust to bring tip-offs is vital. Just 24 hours before we arrived, a potential suicide bomber was arrested here.
The NP is doing a good, very professional job. The ANA, we are partnered with them. We bring them our fire support, logistics, medevac capabilities, etc. And they have gained experience, a lot of experience, and lots of material also from the coalition. So I think they are well adapted to the insurgents they are facing.
So this place is ready for the next transition, you think, the next group?
At least we are working on it. Yes, we're working on it.
The military will tell you there are just dozens of Taliban fighters in this area, but they're able to disappear easily through the mountains. And when foreign forces do hand over control to Afghan security forces, it'll be to men much less well equipped and able to chase after those fighters. Bernard Smith, Inside Story, Sorabi, Afghanistan.
Let's take a look as well now at the cost of the war in Afghanistan. According to the UN, the United States government has spent $444 billion to date on Afghanistan. And some estimates show that this could reach $700 billion. And the human cost of the war has been high too. More than 2,500 coalition troops have been killed. Among those, 1,600 were US soldiers. But the number of Afghan casualties is much higher. The UN says nearly 10,000 Afghans have died since 2006. And many other estimates say the actual number could be much higher. Well, a pretty sobering set of statistics there, and we'll get into that in just a moment, because joining us now are our 3 guests in Dubai. Afghan historian Helena Malikiar. She's also a consultant to international bodies working in Afghanistan, the UNDP and USAID. In Washington, D.C., Caroline Wadhams is a senior fellow at the Center for American Progress. And in Kabul, we have the Afghan Foreign Ministry spokesman, Janan Mosazai. Welcome to all of you to the program. Mr. Mosazai, if I could start with you. How confident are you that Afghan forces are ready to take on this job of the security in your country?
Well, if I could just start by putting things in a little bit of context. The transition process between now and the end of 2014 was agreed between the Afghan government and the international community last November in Lisbon at a NATO summit. And it's the result, really, the outcome of the investments and the efforts of the past 10 years. This is something that we see as a national goal. It is something that we are confident we will be able to see to a successful completion by the end of 2014 because of the qualitative improvements that have occurred in the training, in the equipping of the Afghan National Security Forces, most particularly over the past 2.5 years. Yes, we did have challenges. We did have differences of opinion with our international partners in the training, the equipping of, and the funding of the Afghan National Security Forces in the first 5-6 years of the engagement of the international community in Afghanistan. But over the past 2.5 years, there has been a real change in the amount of funding that has gone into the training of the Afghan National Security Forces and into their equipping, and that work continues. So given that this is a gradual process, given that it's conditions-based, given that it's a result of the hard work and the partnership of Afghanistan and the international community, we are pretty confident that we will see this to a successful completion by the end of 2014. And we have to remember really that transition is not solely about the transfer of security responsibilities. The overall goal of the transition process is the security, the stability, and the long-term peace of Afghanistan that will certainly have effects in the region and far beyond.
Well, I take your point that this is very much a work in process, and it is the result of a very long transition. But just today, for example, we had reports of 4 people being killed in a bomb attack in Mazar-e-Sharif, which was up until now considered one of the safer areas in Afghanistan, and also 3 policemen killed in an attack in Kandahar. So that all sort of taken together feeds the notion that that Afghan forces are simply at this point not ready for this responsibility.
Well, let me just say 2 things to that. Number one, you can't really prevent 100% suicide attacks anywhere in the world, really. We know for a fact that attempts will continue at suicide attacks, at car bombings, at IED attacks. Attempts will also continue to assassinate more Afghan public figures, Afghan leaders, in order to derail not only the transition process, but also to threaten, to endanger the entrenchment, the institutionalization of the achievements of the past 10 years in Afghanistan, which include democracy, a fledgling democracy, which include more rights for women, which include the establishment of a dignified society for the people of Afghanistan who have gone through 30 years of war. The second thing is there are enemies of the transition process, enemies of the peace process, enemies of the stability and security of Afghanistan out there, and we know that they will continue their attempts to endanger this process, to affect it. But we are determined, despite all these odds and despite all these inevitable challenges, to continue with the transition process, and we have the confidence, based on the reasons that I just mentioned, to see this whole process to a successful completion by the end of 2014. And then, of course, the partnership that we are working on with the international community, with the United States, with the European Union, with the United Kingdom, and with other members of the international community and countries in the region, in order to better define the long-term engagement of the international community in Afghanistan beyond 2014.
All right, Calvin Wadhams in Washington. You heard Mr. Mosazai's assessment there that while there are a number of challenges, there is confidence that Afghan troops are up to the job. Do you see it that way?
I think that right now transition is largely symbolic. I mean, I don't see actually major changes that are on the ground occurring from this transition. In reality, it doesn't actually seem that there's much content to this. Where the security is being handed over to Afghan forces, there is a minimal presence of international forces as it is. So transition right now, I see it as symbolic. The larger questions about whether the security forces will be able to handle the security, I don't think anyone knows, because there are so many larger questions that go far beyond the capacities or the technical skill of the actual security forces, whether it's army or police. There are larger questions about the government itself and the legitimacy crisis that it may be experiencing, the role of Pakistan and what it decides to do going forward. You know, there are larger crises going on in the Afghan context that will be determining the long-term transition and security. I think, for example, the United States is ready to, and the international community, to support Afghanistan even beyond 2014 and provide significant funds for the Afghan national security forces. I mean, it could be as much as $6 to $8 billion a year that the United States and others might pony up for the Afghan effort. But there are much larger questions that still need to be resolved around around governance and around regional stability.
Mm-hmm. We'll get into some of that in just a moment. But when you say that this transition is largely symbolic, is that basically that politics is at work here? President Obama, of course, has a very contentious re-election waiting for him next year. The appetite among the American public for continued U.S. troop presence in Afghanistan is simply not there anymore. And this transition, is it basically with all of that in mind?
I think part of it is a U.S. domestic political context where, yes, the Obama administration is basically trying to tell the American people and to the U.S. Congress, we're not going to be there forever, this is going to be handed over, and try to assuage some of the concerns of the American public that we're just going to be in Afghanistan spending these kinds of funds and putting our men and women in harm's way forever. So part of that is the domestic political context. But also the Obama administration is walking this fine line where they also want to decrease dependencies, which they think are dangerous and dysfunctional, of the Afghan government on the United States and the international community. There is a sense that the Obama administration believes they also need to incentivize Afghans, both the leadership and others, to take a greater role, to take on greater responsibilities, and also to send a wake-up call to the region that, you know, there need to be deals made among different international players about a future Afghanistan, that the Afghans and the region cannot depend on the U.S. to be spending, you know, more than $120 billion with 100,000 troops on the ground indefinitely in Afghanistan. That is just not a sustainable strategy. It's not a possibility, and there has to be an incentivizing and a transition. So it speaks both to the region and to Afghanistan and to the domestic political context.
All right, let's put that to Elena Melikiar, our guest in Dubai. This strategy at the moment is unsustainable. Do you agree with that?
The strategy of pulling out the troops?
This basically this transition strategy and dependence on foreign forces, that basically the Afghans are going to have to fend for themselves at some point, and they're going to have to bring in regional players to help them out.
Yes, it is true. Although the Afghans themselves, on any side of the political spectrum you look at, they also favor a gradual transfer of responsibilities to Afghans. But the fact is that the groundwork is not done yet for that kind of a transition, a real transition. In the security area, because mainly of the project of strengthening governance in Afghanistan that has not received serious attention from the international community. And there hasn't, I still don't see a very serious program and serious funding commitment for strengthening governance in Afghanistan while this transition of security responsibilities has started.
All right, if I could turn back to Janan Mosazai on this. I mean, you said earlier that you acknowledged that there are a number of security challenges in Afghanistan. But I just want to get back to this point again. The attack in Kabul a few days ago on the Intercontinental Hotel, which up until that point was considered one of the most secure places in Kabul, and yet up to 7 gunmen were able to attack the hotel and take control of it, and your Afghan forces were not able to subdue them until several hours later, when NATO helicopters had to be called in. Doesn't that suggest that after 10 years of foreign assistance in Afghanistan, there's still a very long way to go for security forces to be able to really take control of the country?
Well, I'll have to repeat my initial point, the fact that you can't really prevent such attacks anywhere in the world, even in countries that are far more stable and far more developed than Afghanistan. And the second point is, the Afghan National Security Forces did respond pretty quickly to the attack and pretty effectively to the attack at the Intercontinental. The attackers were subdued within a few hours, and yes, there was a partial assistance provided to the Afghan security forces.
Sorry to interrupt. My point is that they're not as well equipped. They're still not as well equipped as the foreign forces, and the fact that foreign forces had to be called in to basically finish the job doesn't speak well to the capability of Afghan forces at the moment, does it?
And that's why the transition is a gradual, conditions-based process that will continue for the next 3 years. There has been a significant change in the training and the equipping of the Afghan National Security Forces over the past 2.5 years. So, in a sense, the effort to stand up, to help stand up Afghan National Security Forces in a way that they are able to plan and to execute operations on their own is really 2.5, 3 years old. This effort will continue. We have commitments for that from the international community, and we hope that by the end of 2014, our national security forces will be able to provide for the security of our people and our country. Now, a point that's related to this, and that was raised by our colleague in Washington, and that I pointed to earlier as well, the need for engaging countries in the region and our international partners to seek a long-term, durable political solution in tandem with the transition process for Afghanistan. And that's why we are working very closely with our friends, with our neighbors in Pakistan. That's why we're working very closely with the United States. That's why we're working closely with other countries and organizations in order to implement a national reconciliation process, so that we have a framework whereby we can bring back the Taliban, the armed opposition, into a negotiation process that will discuss everything that's out there, interests that people have in Afghanistan, real or unperceived interests, and also their concerns, so that we can discuss them, so that we can talk about them, so that we can construct, so that we can create a consensus, a lasting agreement about peace and stability and security in Afghanistan that has so much influence on the stability and security of the region and the wider world, so that it's not just an issue of the transfer of security responsibilities to Afghan National Security Forces, but an attempt, an effort, a real, genuine effort after 30 years of war in Afghanistan to bring to an end the tragedy, the suffering of the people of Afghanistan, and to also work towards issues that are in the real interest of the people of this region: economic integration, deepening economic ties for the benefit of the people of Afghanistan and the wider region, and for the security of the world.
Caroline Wadhams, regardless of how the security situation plays out over the next few months and into 2012, the U.S. government is basically wedded to this timetable of withdrawal, isn't it? I mean, no matter how bad things get, they have to justify to the American people that the troops are coming home.
Yes, but again, I mean, they have not, I mean, President Obama has laid out a plan for withdrawing the surge of troops, which is the 33,000 troops, by the summer of 2012. So you still have about 70,000 troops that are left in country. And that could be even in 2013. So, I mean, you're looking at a very slow drawdown of U.S. forces in Afghanistan. And that, you know, honestly, the American public is, a lot of the American public feels that that is not quick enough. So the Obama administration, again, is trying to basically do a transition, but do it in a gradual way where it does not sacrifice the deep investments that have been made and the progress that has been made in Afghanistan. But they are committed. At the same time, we have to remember there is an intense negotiation process that is going on right now between the Afghan government and the U.S. over a strategic partnership, and that would basically map out what the commitment, the bilateral relationship and the commitment by the United States would be to Afghanistan post 2014. And that could include some force level of U.S. troops beyond 2014. We don't know what that looks like. We don't know if the administration is talking about 10,000 troops or something more to provide some sort of security guarantees for Afghanistan.
All right, we'll get into the political aspects of this, which you touched on a little bit earlier. But first, I want to get Elena Malikiar's view on this. Do you think the mission, the foreign mission in Afghanistan, risks falling apart if once foreign troops start to leave in large numbers?
Yes, definitely. I do believe that, and people in Afghanistan in general feel that way, because Afghanistan is simply not ready to stand on its own feet right now. Politically, it's not ready. Economically, it's not ready. Reconstruction and development, it needs a lot of work, and it needs a big commitment, a serious commitment from the international community, from the U.S., to take care of those areas before the foreign troops do a complete or a large pullout. And that's something that I don't hear much about. All the focus is on security issue, about number of troops being pulled out and the schedule and all that, but what about commitment from the United States and from the international community at large about aid for Afghanistan in the next few years, and about development, and about supporting political stability and political development in the country?
Political stability, indeed. I want to turn back to Janan Mosazai on that. I mean, all the parties have said from the beginning that Afghanistan needs a political solution above all else, because military solution will only go a certain way. So given that, what efforts are there in the works right now as far as your government negotiating with the various groups for a political settlement? And that includes the Taliban or any other groups?
Well, look, there has been, we've been talking about the need for a political solution for a long time, the Afghan government. And fortunately, recently, some members of the international community, including the United States, have aligned their views and their positions on the need for a political solution in Afghanistan with the Afghan government position, and now fully support Afghan-led reconciliation and reintegration efforts. We have also been working with the Islamic Republic of Pakistan on the role that Pakistan can play in the Afghan-led reconciliation process, and also with the countries in the Islamic world. We have contacts with those as well, and we remain committed to a political process that preserves the achievements of the past 10 years. We have to remember, the Afghanistan of 2011 is not the Afghanistan of 1994 or 1996 when the Taliban came to power, or the Afghanistan of 2001 when the Taliban government was toppled. We have had significant achievements. Afghanistan is a transformed country. The whole issue of economic development.
All right,
that is significant.
That is going to have
political
to be,
development.
That is going to have to be the last word. We are unfortunately out of time, but we will certainly be following all of those developments to see how things play out in Afghanistan. Thank you to all three of you for taking part: Elena Malikiar, Caroline Wadhams, and Janan Mosazai. Thanks very much for your time. And thank you for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story. Remember, we welcome your comments and suggestions. You can email them to us anytime at insidestory@aljazeera.net. Bye for now.